breaking news. President Trump says expect more U.S. strikes against Iran. Expect them as soon as tonight. And there's more. Trump says expect the strikes to be hard.
Probably hit them hard again tonight. I'll give them a little warning. We're going to hit them hard tonight.
So what prompted this strong reaction from the president?
But they launched a couple of drones and one rocket, one missile, and at ships, because they were in the strait, which they have every right to be. And so we hit them very hard last night. We knocked out 28 boats last night, little ones. That's all they have is little ones.
Are you going to try to take out more tonight?
Will we go tonight? You know, normally I wouldn't tell you. I wouldn't tell you, but you know what? There's not a thing they can do about it. So the answer is probably.
So is the ceasefire dead?
To me, I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum. You know what scum is? They're scum. They're sick people. They're led by sick people. And they're vicious, violent people. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they'd use it. As far as I'm concerned, it's over. I'll speak to our negotiators. They want to negotiate. They're good people. Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner. But they have to come back to me. As far as I'm concerned, it's just a waste of time dealing with them. They're liars. We make a deal. And if I make a deal with him, we have a deal. And he goes out, he talks. We make a deal. Everyone's agreed. No nuclear weapon. We make a deal. They go outside, talk to the press. They say, we never even talked about it. There's something wrong with them. They're cuckoo. As far as I'm concerned, it's over.
Iran is responding. A spokesperson for the Iranian parliament said, quote, Trump has once again spoken of occupying Kharg Island. Come on, we're waiting for you, and we promise that not even a single American soldier will return alive, end quote. And now turning to the news here at home. Thousands of new jobs are expected. Why is that? President Trump's senior counselor for trade and manufacturing, Peter Navarro, will join me. I'm Greta Van Susteren. This is The Record. As we wait to see if President Trump carries out his threat of hitting Iran hard tonight, does America still have enough manpower in the Middle East to carry out his threat? National security correspondent Carla Babb joins me. Carla?
Hey, Greta. Good afternoon. Defense officials tell me that 2 ships with USS Tripoli Amphibious Ready Group have actually exited the CENTCOM area of operations and are now sailing in the Indian Ocean after months of supporting the war against Iran. USS Tripoli and USS Rushmore are both in the Indian Ocean, but the 3rd ship with the Ready Group, USS New Orleans, is still in the Arabian Sea in CENTCOM, but is expected to move into U.S. Pacific Command soon. USS Tripoli Amphibious Ready Group carried roughly 3,500 sailors and Marines. These forces helped carry out strikes against Iran and enforced the U.S. blockade in the Strait through the seizure of tankers. U.S. Central Command says more than 20 American Navy ships are still patrolling the waters after last night's attack on Iran hit more than 80 targets, including radar sites, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps small boats, and anti-ship and air defense systems. Iran, as you mentioned, retaliated with strikes against Kuwait and Bahrain and threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz. Trump today renewed past threats to strike Iran's civilian infrastructure, including electric plants and desalination plants, and to seize oil production on Kharg Island. Let's listen.
We attacked Kharg Island last night. We knocked out a piece. I said, don't touch the oil, because maybe we'll take over Kharg Island. You know, we may take over Kharg Island. There's not a thing they can do about it.
Now, the U.S. already bombed military targets on the island during the first 2 months of the war. Current and former defense officials say seizing the island would likely require boots on the ground. That would likely take tens of thousands of Marines and soldiers on Kharg Island and the surrounding areas. Now, the USS Boxer Amphibious Ready Group kind of made a swap with the Tripoli. It arrived in the region last week with roughly 4,500 Marines and sailors, according to U.S. Central Command. So commanders have roughly a similar number of Marines there now as they did the last time officials officials floated this idea of taking Kharg Island. But for context, Greta, the Iwo Jima and Kharg Island are about the same. Iwo Jima in Japan, and it took 70,000 Marines to take that island of Iwo Jima in World War II. The battle lasted about a month. Thousands died in the fight. The president is clearly not happy with Iran's actions, but in many ways we are back to where we started at the beginning of the war, with a renewed bombing campaign and a strait in jeopardy. Greta.
Carla Babb, thank you. Earlier, President Trump made this haunting statement.
I'm number one on the kill list for Iran. They're lovely people. I'm number one. So I don't know. I can't tell you that, but I don't really care, because I'm doing my job, and I'm doing it, I hope, better than anybody's ever done it.
And as we are accustomed to hearing, President Trump did not hold back when asked about the Iranian regime.
These are evil, sick people, and we have to rid their cancer. They're cancer. And you know what you do? You got to cut out cancer early.
Well, maybe President Trump was watching our news show yesterday, because that is exactly what Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told me.
It's like, you know, when you excise a piece of cancer, a lump of cancer from your body, you know, it may come back. But you know one thing, if you wouldn't do it, you could die. And Israel was obviously placed with an existential threat. And America was placed with was threatened with a very great danger.
Another concern of the Prime Minister is Turkey. President Trump is just leaving the NATO summit in Turkey, but while there, he met with Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Trump is considering selling F-35 fighter jets to Turkey. Prime Minister Netanyahu is adamantly opposed to that sale. He says that sale would greatly destabilize the region.
Erdogan has a regime that threatens Greece, a NATO partner, occupies half of Cyprus, a NATO partner, and frankly, openly calls for Israel's destruction. He's put more journalists in jail than I think any other regime in the world. He puts his opponents in jail. He is infected completely by the Muslim Brotherhood movement, which hates America and chants death to America. I would not trust him. He's not a friend of the United States.
Today, President Trump said this about Turkey's president.
I like Erdogan. I'll tell you, I like President Erdogan. He rolled out the red carpet. He's terrific. You know, he could have gone into the war. A lot of people saying, like with Bibi, I like Bibi. I think Bibi was a terrific wartime prime minister. But Bibi said rough things yesterday about Turkey and Erdogan. And I said, you know, I spoke to him. I said, he could have gone into the war because he doesn't like Israel much. And he doesn't like Bibi much. And he didn't go because of me. And this is a military power. Millions of soldiers. Turkey is very strong. They have a lot of our best equipment. They're trying to get the F-35s.
Founder and president of Eurasia Group and G0 Media, Ian Bremmer, joins me. Nice to talk to you again, sir. And two-part question is, number one, has President Trump been patient enough? And number two, what is the strategy moving forward?
When it comes to Iran, President Trump certainly feels like he needs to hit back against the Iranians now that the Iranians have taken shots at several ships, including ships of U.S. allies, attempting to traverse the Strait of Hormuz. And the memorandum of understanding that was signed by the United States and Iran said free and unfettered passage of that strait. So if the Iranians are going to take shots at those ships, the United States has to hit back. And that means the ceasefire is suspended, at least insofar as the Americans want to retaliate. That happened yesterday. I have no doubt it's going to continue to happen today. But that's very different from Trump restarting the war. He has also said that he doesn't want the war to restart. He doesn't expect that because the United States doesn't have great options for taking the oil, for occupying Kharg Island, or for obliterating the Iranian regime without taking on risks, both economic and geostrategic, that President Trump heretofore has considered to be unacceptably large for the United States.
What do you think? I mean, I hate to put you in this position of thinking for someone else, but what do you think the Iranians were thinking when they started doing that last night? I mean, wouldn't you think that they would expect that President Trump would take some action and it might enrage him to take even greater action?
Some action, but limited action, certainly limited in the context of what the Iranians have already withstanded from the United States and from Israel, including the decapitation of their regime. They're showing that they're capable of taking a hell of a lot more pain than the Americans have dished out in the last 24 hours. That's clear. That builds a level of credibility for the Islamic Republic. What they were thinking, Greta, is that since the United States has lifted the blockade, about 75% of the ships that have gone through the strait have not taken the northern Iranian route. They've taken the southern Omani route, and that gives the Iranians less leverage. The United States has 10 ships in the strait that are engaged in demining right now. You get rid of those mines, you can go through the middle of the strait. That gives Iran less leverage. Also, you've got oil prices that had dropped below $70. Not so anymore. But when oil prices go low, the Iranians have less leverage. So what they were thinking is we need to take a couple of shots at these ships to show everyone that we still have leverage and we're going to be able to determine outcomes for getting through the strait. You Gulf states cannot force us into a compromise that we find unacceptable. That's clearly what the Iranians were thinking in taking that decision.
Well, it's always great if we can negotiate our way out of problems and we can embrace diplomacy to solve problems. But just looking back in history since 1979 with Iran, did you ever think that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner would be able to negotiate some contract or some deal that the Iranians could live with, we could live with, and that the Iranians would not violate?
It's hard to say. I mean, sending in, no matter how loyal and trusted they are by the president, to, obviously Jewish individuals, both very close to Israel, being sent in to negotiate with the regime that calls for death to Israel all the time, run by the supreme leader. Hard to imagine that's going to lead to a trusted outcome. But as Trump just said in the last 24 hours, maybe he'll just finish this without a deal. Maybe he doesn't need a negotiated settlement. At the end of the day, he doesn't want to return to war. He's concerned about the economic catastrophe that would continue, that would happen, as he has said on several occasions, if the U.S. persisted with a blockade. So if the Americans simply unilaterally stop the fighting and say we're not going to engage with these folks anymore, and if they try to build a nuclear weapon, we're going to blow them up, which, to be fair, was exactly what happened last June during the 12-day war. I mean, you avoid a lot of ongoing problems if that is your position. You create other problems, but if you're not willing to actually escalate militarily against Iran, and Trump has shown that he has great hesitation against doing that, much to the chagrin of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, then you don't have many other good options.
Well, it seems to me that last June, when we went in, the idea was to make it so that so they couldn't make a nuclear weapon, and there was a lot of victory dance around that. Then, of course, about 8 months later, February 28th, then we do this again. In the interim period, in early January, there were the protests where the Iranian regime was killing protesters. So we sort of went in. I mean, there was some part of it saying that we wanted to protect these protesters. And so now, I must admit, I'm a little bit confused. Does Iran today, do you think, have a nuclear enrichment program? How do we know? How do we find it? And how do we, is bombing it enough, or do we have to take them to their knees with getting Kharg Island?
First of all, I don't understand how taking Kharg Island would necessarily end Iran's efforts to build a nuclear enrichment program. It would hurt them economically, but again, they've dealt with a lot of economic pain over the course of the past years, and they've still shown themselves to be incredibly resilient as a brutally repressive regime. What I do know is if they were to move towards actual development of a nuke, not just the capacity, but actually developing one or more, the Israelis and very likely the United States would immediately take military steps against them. There wouldn't be a constraint there, and the Iranians know it. And one of the things that had prevented them from taking the strait and disrupting it was not the concern that the Americans would hit them, but rather that they feared that there would be decapitation strikes against their regime if they were to do so. Now, once the U.S. and Israel choose not just to go after their nuclear program, which had led to Iranian retaliation, but very contained Iranian retaliation. They were talking a big game. They didn't do very much. But instead, when you actually assassinate their leaders, at that point, the Iranians break glass, pull emergency lever. And that led, of course, to the economic catastrophe that Trump was warned about. So, what you have is a United States leader that now is showing that there are real limits to what he's willing to do to Iran, real limits to the actions that he's going to take. So it appears that the Americans are more deterred than the Iranians are as a result of this war launched at the end of February.
Ian Bremmer, thank you very much, and we'll wait to see what the president does or does not do tonight, as he is hinting, at least he's hinting he's going to do something. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure, Greta. See you.
Coming up, Trump's top trade advisor, Peter Navarro, is here. What he says about a big, big opportunity for America. Plus, the buck stops with Trump. What is now happening to the $20 bill? That when the record continues.
A Social Security update. Millions collect Social Security, but 70% of Americans don't get their full benefits. Now, a new report shows how to boost your Social Security by as much as $188,000. Author Matthew Allen reveals 5 key strategies in a new report. Newsmax calls it the best guide for retirees. Everyone needs this free Social Security report. Act today to get your full benefits.
Hello, everyone. It's President Donald J. Trump, and it's Trump time. Check out this red beauty. It's one of my new watches. Wear it proudly on your wrist, and everyone will know exactly what it's for, who it represents. It's really going to be something special. It's for your favorite president. Get your watch today at gettrumpwatches.com. These make a great gift. It's Trump time.
My name is Karen, and I'm the head pharmacist at Corvallis Drug. This pharmacy has actually been here for over 100 years. I love the fact that I know all of my customers by name. We'll get customers come in and they're looking for a brain supplement, and Prevagen is the one I recommend. My husband, I put him on it about 6 months ago, and he's noticed a difference. I've noticed a difference in him. It's just a product that I believe in.
Prevagen has been the #1 selling brain supplement nationwide for over 10 years.
Most people call leaf filter when their gutters are clogged and they notice one of the many issues that can bring. You can get ahead of costly damage by protecting your home's gutters today.
Schedule your free inspection today. Call 833-LEAF-FILTER or visit leaffilter.com.
When I started Walton Goggins Goggle Glasses, I didn't know how to turn all this fancy prettiness into a classy-looking logo. But GoDaddy Aero does, with its magical AI powers. It not only creates it, it slaps that sweet thing everywhere.
We just got breaking news. CENTCOM is confirming there are new strikes on Iran, as President Trump certainly hinted to in Turkey. And a car company based in Japan that builds cars in Mexico now has a big billion-dollar opportunity for America. Here's President Trump earlier today talking about Toyota.
The car companies are building like crazy. In fact, as you probably saw a big announcement yesterday, Toyota is leaving Mexico, and they're going to build one of the biggest car manufacturing plants in the world in Texas. That's because of the tariffs, because we don't mind if you build in Mexico, but if you build in Mexico, you have to pay 25% tariff.
Toyota is going to invest $3.6 billion in America, and the plan involves moving production of Tacoma trucks from Mexico to San Antonio, Texas. Senior Counselor for Trade and Manufacturing, Peter Navarro, joins me. Nice to see you, sir.
Nice to see you, Greta.
So how did you get, was there actually a discussion with Toyota, or did the tariffs get just so onerous that they decided to do this themselves?
You don't have to have discussions with companies. It's simple economics here. We have two things going on. One's obvious, the 232 tariffs. But secondly, just last week, Jamieson Greer, the USTR, announced that we wouldn't be renewing the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement on schedule. Now, there's going to be certainly negotiations to possibly revamp that, but it hasn't worked. We've had a trade deficit that went up 50% with USMCA. That wasn't supposed to happen. We had the parts from the America that were supposed to go into cars fall dramatically. And what has happened is Mexico has essentially become a staging area to come into the U.S. And a particular problem with Chinese auto parts. So we're going to get $3.6 billion in San Antonio, 2,000 jobs direct, another 20,000 because of the supply chain effects and the multiplier effects. And this is going to be the first. You're going to see Hyundai, you're going to see Honda, you're going to see Nissan. Everybody's going to come here because of those factors.
Is Mexico, where I grew up, we'd say squealing like a stuck pig? I mean, is Mexico mad?
Well, look, Mexico has culpability in this, as does Canada. One of the problems we had with losing our auto parts, this is a little in the weeds, but it's important. There was a dispute over just how you would value content in Mexico and Canada coming into the U.S. And Mexico and Canada, in a 2-to-1 vote against the U.S., had a lax rule which essentially opened the door for all these Chinese auto parts. The China thing is, Greta, they're doing this all over the world, but they have just poured in with investment into Mexico. The lax environment there allows that stuff to seep in to the USMCA chain without being labeled as Chinese content. China's got an overcapacity problem in autos like they do in steel and copper and everything else, and they're just inundating the world, and Mexico was a staging area. So Mexico needs to get their act together, essentially.
I thought for a long time, and this may be old information, is that labor costs in these other countries were so significantly lower that it would overcome other economic forces like tariffs. I mean, aren't the labor costs in this Toyota plant so much lower in Mexico or not?
No, that's kind of old school thinking in a way. I mean, they have these big modern factories, but we got big modern factories as well. The fact of the matter is, in the auto industry, it's all about productivity, and that means robots and machines and advanced technology. There's no question that the 25% tariff that we've imposed, not just on autos, but auto parts, has made the big difference, and that's why these companies are coming. And the reason why we do this is to overcome unfair trade practices, to be clear. And whether it's the IP theft or the massive government subsidy or this or that, we as a nation cannot afford to lose our auto industry. I mean, one of the beauties of Donald Trump's thinking about things, it goes back to 2018, the national security strategy, is national security equal economic security. I mean, we remember that World War II was run with the arsenal of democracy, and the arsenal of democracy was when we took our auto plants and turned them into tank plants and aircraft plants and all that kind of stuff like that. So this is a good thing, and maybe USMCA is able to renegotiate. But Mexico cannot allow itself to be a staging area to inundate us with cars.
President Trump said something in Turkey today with Secretary of Treasury staying on the stage with him about Spain. He doesn't want to do business with Spain because Spain was, as he said, was a lousy partner because they weren't very helpful in terms of the war in Iran, as Italy was not either. Yeah. Is that something that comes across your plate in terms of what we're going to do about whether there will be any economic pressure put on Spain?
Not my lane, no.
No? No. Are we going to do anything at all, do you think?
Well, look, if you just look at the chessboard, I mean, what the hell's going on here? We basically finance pretty much all of NATO. The other countries say that they're going to up their ante. They never do. I mean, the amount of money...
But do we have pressure on...
But hang on. The amount of money the American taxpayers put into NATO, and then all we ask them to do is to help us secure their petroleum from the Strait of Hormuz. We don't get any from there. And you have Spain and Great Britain not helping and everybody else squawking. I mean, what is that about? So President Trump is rightfully not happy about it. The American people that need to understand that Iran, going back to the days of the 70s when they took over our embassy, since that time, they've been costing us nothing but money and blood since that time with their terrorism. I mean, please remember, in Iraq, it was Soleimani with his IEDs innovation that cut the legs and arms off American soldiers. I've seen those folks at Walter Reed, and I feel for them. But that's Iran.
And President Trump took care of Soleimani, so he's finished. But anyway, Peter Navarro, nice to see you.
Great to see you.
Nice to see you, sir. And now it's time for a flashback. Here's a clip from 12 years ago involving some change to the change in your pocket.
Last week, a young girl wrote to ask me, why aren't there any women on our currency? And then she gave me a long list of possible women to put on our dollar bills and quarters and stuff, which I thought was a pretty good idea.
Well, 2 years after then-President Obama giving those remarks, Obama set out to put Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. Tubman, a slavery abolitionist, was set to replace President Andrew Jackson. The original plan was to get the Tubman bill out by the year 2020. Then in his first term, President Trump shelved that plan. Then former President Joe Biden took office, and he renewed it. So now what? Well, as you can tell, nothing ever happened, and now it might not ever happen. This week, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that his department is no longer moving forward with the redesign of the $20 bill. Bessent did not provide a reason. Coming up, after being ousted for years, Russia is making a comeback. What do we mean? That when the record continues.
Join Carl Higbie and his fellow veterans and hear what they have to say about call to service, the rise in socialism, and protecting our Second Amendment. Voices of Valor. Tonight at 6 p.m. only on Newsmax.
Kevin Sorbo here, and I have an important message to share. The government needs more money. Your money. If you owe the IRS back taxes, they can garnish your wages and levy your bank accounts. They can even seize your retirement or take your home. Don't let the IRS target you. Call the professionals at Tax Network USA. Their tax lawyers and enrolled agents are experts in powerful programs that may even help you eliminate your tax debt.
Call for a free consultation or visit tnusa.com.
It's 2 a.m., your fever spiked and you're miserable. Here's your options.
Urgent care, closed. ER, slammed, and you'll spend hundreds of thousands in both. Telehealth, yeah, but the pharmacies are closed.
That's the reason why we keep emergency medical kits at home.
It has doctor-prescribed medication like generic Z-Pak, amoxicillin, other antibiotics and antivirals. You can treat flu, pneumonia, strep, sinus infections, UTIs, and more.
Because if you're sick in at night, traveling or stranded, you don't want options.
You want what is inside this kit. No waiting, no pharmacy, and no copays.
Just schedule a quick telehealth call.
And that's how you feel better faster and avoid serious complications.
Every family should have this kit, and here's how to order yours.
Order online in minutes and use the promo code to save $45. Your doctor-prescribed kit ships fast to your door, packed with medications to treat over 30 conditions. So when something hits, you're ready. And a wellness company telehealth doctor is always there if you need guidance.
When Conor McGregor fights, you're witnessing something once in a lifetime.
Surprise, surprise, the king is back!
All my life I want money and power.
Oh! Conor McGregor transcended the sport! Max Holloway! That's a real warrior! I'm right here! You're in for a treat!
McGregor vs. Holloway, Saturday, July 11th. Free with your subscription, only on Paramount Plus.
Don't kibble your dog.
Hey, Dr. Marty.
Hey, back.
What's wrong with this?
Let's check it out. It's still kibble, which means they're ultra-processed. At Dr. Marty, we freeze-dry premium meats, fruit, and vegetables, and it's available at your local pet store.
This is a paid advertisement for legal services. If you or a loved one has mesothelioma or any other asbestos-related cancer, call now. Asbestos manufacturers sold deadly asbestos materials to thousands of companies, putting workers at risk. An estimated $30 billion in court-ordered trusts have been set aside to pay out claims to asbestos asbestos victims. You may be entitled to a portion of these funds and receive compensation without filing a lawsuit or ever going to court. For your free legal consultation, call 1-800-306-1979. That's 1-800-306-1979.
My dad has never been in better shape. He had a stroke and passed away. He had a life insurance policy. Ethos.com. In 10 minutes, you can be covered with life insurance.
Check your price today at ethos.com.
My heart has experienced life-changing wins, losses, and countless miles. To keep living at my speed, I trust Cunol CoQ10. CoQ10 is the #1 cardiologist-recommended supplement for heart health. Cunol, the brand I trust.
We continue to report on the breaking news. As we mentioned earlier in the show, CENTCOM says the United States is conducting new strikes on Iran. President Trump vowed to strike tonight and to strike hard, and indeed he is striking. Yesterday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told me he was skeptical about any deal with Iran. Can Iran be trusted? Has Iran changed? And can we possibly work a deal out with them?
No, of course you can't trust them, and therefore I don't know if there will be a deal or no deal.
Middle East correspondent Zach Anders is live in Tel Aviv, where it is 11:31 p.m. Zach, what's the reaction, or is it too early for a reaction in Israel to the president's comments, and now the president calling for the strikes and the strikes happening in Iran right now?
I would say that from what we were hearing today, Greta, from our sources in Jerusalem, there was a sense that this was where it was always going to go, and that what comes next is about to be more of the same. The Israeli involvement in further attacks, strikes, that's going to be the question going forward, because we are in a pattern, a loop, a cycle of these tit-for-tat strikes. And what we're seeing right now, and I mean specifically tit-for-tat, in that these attacks are in the same area. The U.S. striking in southern Iran along the coastline, and the Iranians responding with attacks for the U.S. Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, at one of the main largest air bases in Kuwait. That has happened now. I would have to go back and check my notes real thoroughly, but I think this is the 4th or 5th time since this ceasefire began where the escalation has looked like this. It's been tempered. We've seen the U.S. striking radar sites, fast attack boats, some of the drone launch posts, all in southern Iran. These have not been very deep attacks inside the country, and the Iranians have not blasted their missiles across the region like they did at the start of the all-out war when we were in this position back in February. Instead, they're attacking the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain and those air bases in Kuwait. And again, that will be the calculus that I think we measure this against tonight, is if Iran responds in that same way to right now what appears to be the same set of U.S. strikes, all in the south, all along the coastline, along the Strait of Hormuz. And back to that point earlier about the Israelis here, they're very much on the sidelines, but at any moment there's an opportunist sense in Jerusalem, I think, right now. With the funeral for the Ayatollah tomorrow, he's going to be buried tomorrow in northern Iran, very deep inside that country, hard to get air power over that area. But things would be in motion right now if there's some thinking within the Pentagon, within the Kiryat, which is Israel's version of the Pentagon, that if there's a series of targets that are on their way into northern Iran, perhaps they're in an airplane right now, and everybody is thinking that this is about to explode once again. I think the Israelis are looking very closely at their target list, perhaps some top IRGC generals. They might be looking at this as an opportune moment as well.
Zach Anders, thank you very much. And Russia got some good news. It will be able to compete in the upcoming 2028 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. The International Olympic Committee says it has now lifted its suspension on Russia. Russia was suspended in October 2023 due to its invasion of Ukraine. Here is more from the IOC about its decision.
We don't condone any wars, including this one, and that is a stance that we will continue to take, and we will continue to support Ukraine like we have since this started. I don't believe athletes should pay the price. We wanted to ensure all athletes have the possibility to compete at the Olympic Games and not be held responsible for their government's actions.
Meanwhile, there is still no word whether Russia's athletes will be able to compete under its flag. Since 2019, Russia has been barred from displaying the country's flag. The reason, not because of Ukraine, but due to state-sponsored doping offenses. So this has meant that Russian athletes competed without their country's flag, with no mention of Russia and with no national anthem at the game. And in one case, in tennis, a gray box was shown where a flag would normally be displayed. The Kremlin has called the decision by the IOC a, quote, important step. Coming up, calls are growing for Democrat Maine Senate candidate Graham Platner to drop out of the Maine Senate race, but is he going to drop out? That when the record continues.
Remember Joe Biden? He was totally lost, had no idea where he was. And the big media, they knew it, but they covered for it. We deserve the truth, all of us.
Watch Greg Kelly Reports, only on Newsmax.
This July at Renewal by Andersen. Replace your windows, your patio doors, or your entry door, and we're going to give you an amazing opportunity. You ready? Pay nothing, and I mean zero zilch nada, for 18 months. I'm talking about no deposit, no monthly payments, and no interest until January of 2028. Choosing Renewal by Andersen to replace your windows and doors makes your home worth more. 3 out of 4 real estate agents surveyed agree Andersen products increase a home's value by at least 10%. Do the math. I think you're going to be happy. Let us show you colors, styles, and inspiration for your home. Get started by meeting with one of our design consultants by July 31st. Don't wait. Call 1-800-264-0500.
Clients who rolled over their IRAs 2 or 3 years ago have doubled and tripled their retirement accounts. Billionaire Eric Sprott disclosed he has invested 98% of his $3 billion fortune into gold and silver, and said gold's going to $10,000 an ounce. Vanguard and Goldman warned of a lost decade ahead for stocks. Gold's role isn't to make you rich, it's to help you survive what's coming. Aren't these supposed to be your golden years? Call Patriot Gold Group at 1-800-778-4156. Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold and silver dealer nationwide, home of the America 250 no-fee for life IRA. Call now and see how easy it is to protect your IRA with physical gold and silver. Call now, 1-800-778-4156.
If your roof looks like this, your home is at risk. A new metal roof from Erie Home withstands wind up to 120 miles per hour and hail up to 2 inches, all backed by a 50-year warranty. Call now for 50% off installation. Get your free estimate now.
Honey, Mortgage Bunny 6 says we should keep renting.
Mortgage Bunny 6?
Reba says more realtor agents recommend Realtor.com. They track every market so you know when to make your move.
He also says that Bigfoot... Got it.
Make it real with Realtor.com.
Now, tirzepatide for weight management is available in a dissolvable tablet. It's not the injection and doesn't offer the same strength or clinical evidence as the injectable form, and results will differ from the injection. But for patients who don't want shots, this tablet option is worth exploring, understanding results will differ from the injection. Tirzepatide tablets are a prescription that starts with a telehealth evaluation by a licensed physician who reviews your health history. And if it's right for you, they prescribe it. This might be worth a conversation.
Hey, I'm Dr. Drupinski. I've been looking at the aging process for a long time. Fatty 15 actually slows it down. Fatty 15 comes out of Navy dolphin research. Without the C15, our cells become fragile and age and oxidize. This pushes that back. That's why I take Fatty 15.
Could the war between the United States and Iran impact Vice President J.D. Vance's chances at winning the White House in 2028? And is Vance going to run? Maybe a crowded field. And back in June, a reporter asked President Donald Trump about Vance's handling of Iran. Here is that exchange.
There's some element to this where you send the vice president. If it works out, great, you look like a genius for sending him. And if it doesn't work out, it's the vice president's fault.
I like that idea, sure. What? This way, if it works out, I'm going to take the credit. If it doesn't work out, I'm blaming J.D. You better be careful, J.D. He's going to turn his plane around and get the hell out of here. Yeah, I like that idea. I think it's a good idea.
Today, Vice President Vance delivered remarks in Milwaukee, and he gave this update on Iran.
The basic deal that we cut was, we'll lift our blockade if you stop shooting at ships. But if you shoot at ships, we are going to punch back, and we're going to punch back harder than ever before. That was the deal. They said they would stop shooting at ships, and what happened 24 hours ago? They started shooting at ships again. Now, they were good. They were well-behaved for about a week, but then they started shooting at ships. So the deal is very simple. If they shoot at ships, we're going to knock the hell out of them, and it's that simple, and that's the basic way it's going to work.
Meanwhile, calls are growing for Democrat Maine Senate candidate Graham Platner to drop out of the Senate race. This comes after Jenny Rasico, who says she previously dated Platner, said he drunkenly forced her to have sex after she told him to stop. Since her allegation, author Stephen King deleted an X post that reads, quote, Graham Platner may drop out. I hope he doesn't. But meanwhile, the abuser-in-chief just keeps on keeping on, end quote. Well, after deleting that post, King took to X again to say, quote, not defending Graham Platner. If he committed rape, he should bow out, just making a comparison, end quote. Right now, Maine Democrats are looking for options to replace Platner on the ballot. It's important to note that the Maine Democratic Party cannot force Platner to drop out. Yesterday, Maine Democratic Party Executive Director Devin Murphy Anderson said this.
The Maine Democratic Party has been working around the clock to develop a process to replace our U.S. Senate nominee that is open, inclusive, transparent, and fair. Unfortunately, Graham Platner's team has repeatedly reached out to us in an attempt to put their thumb on the scale of what this process looks like. We have repeatedly reiterated to Graham Platner's team that they have no role in determining our next Democratic nominee for the U.S. Senate, nor in determining what this process looks like. We have also reiterated that Graham Platner must drop out of this race so that Democrats in Maine can focus on defeating Susan Collins this November.
This Maine Senate race is extremely important, even if you do not live in Maine. That person is aiming to win the Senate seat for the Democratic Party. It's currently held by Republican Senator Susan Collins. And with such a closely divided U.S. Senate, each state seat matters. CPAC Chairman Matt Schlapp joins me, as well as former Special Assistant to President Biden, Michael LaRosa. Michael, I don't think that the Democratic Party of Maine is a great fan of Graham Platner. That was sort of a blistering something or other.
Well, he put them in a terrible situation. He's put everybody in a terrible situation. So he should just drop out and allow the party process to work itself out.
He should stay in. The voters elected him, and this young woman that's running the state party in Vermont, she basically says...
Maine, I think.
Excuse me,
Maine.
Maine.
I hope she's not Vermont.
Us Midwesterners, you know, Maine, Vermont. But the...
Says somebody who lived in D.C. 30 years.
Fair enough. She's saying he must drop out because, in the end, he has the right to stay in. So, you know, he's got all the control here.
He can stay in or stay out. I don't really care what he does. I think the seat's lost.
Well, it does matter.
But I think the seat's lost at this point.
She's going to
anyway.
win. Susan Collins is going to win.
Yeah, he's done so much damage to the Democratic Party, to, well, the left, and that's their problem. They own him. But he's done so much damage at this point. I don't even think it matters. But when you lose Bernie Sanders and Mamdani, it's a huge problem for Platner's consultants, because those are his clients too, and that's where the pressure is going to come.
But don't they own him? I mean, they elected this man, even though there was a lot out there about him and his tattoo that was inappropriate, texts that were inappropriate, and you know, they still voted for him, so they were good with all that.
You know what, though? I mean, this is a problem. I think it's a bigger problem for the Democratic Party. It goes to you, Michael. I mean, you've even got Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's sort of the poster child for the Progressive Party, along with Senator Bernie Sanders, previously said, and I hate to, you know, kick someone when he's down, but she said that Graham Platner was my kind of man. I mean, it's just like, you know, like that's going to be on every single ad, my kind of man.
Yeah, she should sit the rest of the cycle out. Her track record for endorsements has been horrendous. She endorsed that woman in California running for governor, I forget her name, Katie Porter. She endorsed Mallory McMorrow, who had to just drop out in Michigan. And she went in big for Graham Platner, went campaigning for him. She's been a surrogate for him. You know, Sanders and Warren really owe the DSCC and Senator Schumer an apology. They were trying to make sure to prevent exactly this from happening.
You know, it's the part of the country's closely divided, 50-50 on the whole politics thing. Matt, I don't think your party necessarily is got to walk to the walk to the bank after this. I think it's going to be a tough November. But the big thing I see for both parties is getting the vote out, the enthusiasm factor. And now you've got, with the news going on right now in Iran, there's a big portion of the Republican Party, or maybe not a big portion, but a loud portion of the Republican Party that doesn't like this Iran war and says it's a betrayal.
So I guess I'll say first that the Democrats actually have the advantage this cycle, but they've nominated some people that are making that very hard. Tallarico in Texas. I think this disaster.
Why do you say the advantage?
What did you say?
It's the advantage because that's history that the...
Yeah, because 6 years in, if you look at this as back-to-back
you would think
terms,
it'd be the other way around. You have the opportunity to fix things.
Yeah,
but it doesn't work out that
6
way.
years in, Obama got, he said, walloped. George W. Bush got walloped 6 years in, so it's pretty typical. The voters get tired of kind of one-party rule.
So how are you getting the Republicans out to vote?
That's a great question. So on Iran, there is no question that if the president can sell the reason why he doesn't like to call it a war, but the military operations in Iran are necessary, he's a great communicator. That would make things a lot better. But as it stands, the American people think this is a military operation of our choosing and not one that we had to react to. So it looked like we were the aggressor. I think not letting Iran get a nuclear weapon is a line in the sand that Trump is going to hold, and I applaud him for that. The American people are with him on that. They don't know if they're with him on this idea of the next step, which is regime change, maybe with boots on the ground, to take the Strait. Those types of questions. He'd have to make the moral case to the American people to do
Michael,
that.
every time I hear Matt just said a military operation, I always feel had when we're shooting at people, we don't call it a war.
It's a euphemism.
Wait, no, I know, but I feel had by anyone who says that.
No, we're at war. They're shooting at our ships. We're
spending a lot of money.
Yes, I mean, spending a lot of money, a lot of resources, and bombing them, and people are dying. We're at war. It's fair to say.
We're at war?
Yeah, and I think we're at war in several parts of the world. I think we're very naive in America. Like, the reason why we have troops in so many points across the globe is because there are flashpoints. We are basically at war with China. We ought to just admit it. It's not a hot war, but there is a war to control this whole idea of freedom.
Trump was saying how much he likes President Xi today.
Look,
we've got new friends. We've got President Erdogan, President Xi, brand new friends.
He also has to be the diplomat in chief. He has to try to get along with these guys. He's trying with Iran. But I like his take, his most recent take. The government of Iran is scum. I think that was the best summation of things.
Yeah, I don't think you get a lot of disagreement on that one. Matt Schlapp, Michael LaRosa, thank you both very much. Coming up, teens will be teens. A 15-year-old tennis star gets herself in a bit of trouble. That when the record continues.
Every day across the globe, big business agendas go unseen by investors. Things that go against your core values and beliefs. It's time to know your investments. Abortion, alternative lifestyles, gender and identity confusion. If you believe in protecting marriage and life, children, innocence, guarding masculinity, restoring families, defending religious liberty. Invest with your values. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
Where's the admission desk at your hospital? You may need it sooner than you think. It's the middle of the night and you, your spouse, or your child is sick, high fever, can't keep anything down, and getting worse. Now you're waiting in the ER, and everyone gets seen before you. And when I finally see you and order prescriptions, you still have to wait for your pharmacy to open and hope they have what I prescribed. This is the medical emergency kit. It's stocked with essential medications, including amoxicillin, generic Z-Pak, and ivermectin. Now you have the right medications when you need them. And it's why I and so many of my colleagues have medical emergency kits. It's like having an urgent care and pharmacy in your home. Just fill out a brief online medical intake and your kit, prescribed by a licensed provider, is shipped to your door. Here's how to order.
Order your kit now and save $45. Visit urgentcarekit.com/news. That's urgentcarekit.com/news.
Hello, everyone. It's President Donald J. Trump, and it's Trump time. Check out this red beauty. It's one of my new watches. Wear it proudly on your wrist, and everyone will know exactly what it's for, who it represents. It's really going to be something special. It's for your favorite president. Get your watch today at GetTrumpWatches.com. These make a great gift. It's Trump time.
My parents have both passed. My dad was a veteran. He loved the military. So I wanted to give his car to the military so that veterans could get some money. My first thought was Tunnel to Towers. They set you up with a time, a date. They pick it up. All you need is your title and keys. They sell it. They get back to you with the receipt. You use it for your taxes at the end of the year, and you're good.
Join us in supporting our nation's heroes. Go to T2T.org to make a positive impact.
This was cruel to Today Show host Savannah Guthrie. A false ransom note sent about her mother, Nancy Guthrie, giving rise to hope, and it was fake. And now the person who sent the fake ransom note has pled guilty and will be sentenced in the near future. In the meantime, the imposter has been ordered to an inpatient treatment center before his sentencing. 42-year-old Derek Anthony Colella pled guilty to sending earlier this year phony ransom messages to the Guthrie home. He was arrested days after the 84-year-old disappeared. Federal investigators say Colella is not, however, responsible for a ransom note sent to local media. His sentencing is set for September 10. And it is now time for today's edition of What Do You Think? Yeah, today, What Do You Think involves a teenager who lost her cool on the tennis court. It happened at Wimbledon during the junior girls tournament. Ida Wabker from Germany is 15 years old. She was losing her match, and then she missed a crucial point. Out of frustration, the teenager smashed her racket on the ground. The racket bounced and landed in the crowd. She rushed over to apologize. No one was hurt, but still officials disqualified her in the middle of her match. According to the UK tabloid The Sun, the tennis player apologized on her Instagram story as well. She reportedly said, "Blank happens, you learn from it," end quote. So what do you think? Should she have been disqualified, or should we cut her some slack since she quickly apologized and she is young? Tell me what you think. Email me at the address on the bottom of your screen, Greta@Newsmax.com. Coming up, is it happening again? Secretary of State Marco Rubio getting another new job? Why is he holding a camera? That when the record continues.
Join Carl Higbie and his fellow veterans and hear what they have to say about call to service, the rise in socialism, and protecting our Second Amendment. Voices of Valor. Tonight at 6 p.m. only on Newsmax.
Free yourself from prying eyes. Ask privately with Duck.ai. Visit Duck.ai to chat privately with ChatGPT, Claude, and other AIs for free, all in one place. Duck.ai is from DuckDuckGo, where AI is private and optional.
LeafGuard is celebrating America's 250th anniversary with their more than 1 million satisfied customers. And for good reason, LeafGuard has earned the Good Housekeeping seal for more than 20 years. LeafGuard is the only seamless one-piece rainwater management system with a clog-free guarantee and lifetime transferable warranty. And during our Celebrate America sale, receive 75% off installation of a complete LeafGuard system. Act now and get no interest and no payments till 2028. Call LeafGuard during this program and receive our Celebrate America bonus, a $250 Visa gift card with your LeafGuard purchase. It could come in handy this summer to use on your vacation, do a little shopping, or to even fill up your tank. Call 800-541-1274. Now let me give you that number again. 1-800-541-1274.
I would rate LeafGuard a 10.
Having LeafGuard gutters in my house makes me feel really good.
My favorite part of LeafGuard is not watching my husband climb that ladder.
Who wants to spend their summer up on a ladder cleaning out clogged gutters? But leaving them clogged can be a fire hazard. Think about it, all it takes is one spark. With LeafGuard, the top's not a cover, it's part of the gutter. That's why we say LeafGuard, get it today, protect it for life. And during our Celebrate America sale, receive 75% off installation of a complete LeafGuard system. Act now and get no interest and no payments till 2028. Call during this program and receive our Celebrate America bonus, a $250 Visa gift card with your LeafGuard purchase. Use it the next time you go shopping or fill up your tank. Call 800-541-1274. Now let me give you that number again, 1-800-541-1274.
Feeling winded and short of breath when you should be enjoying life? Your days are made for more than this. And if you find yourself stopping more and more to catch your breath, you could be experiencing what we call temporary oxygen insufficiency. Don't let shortness of breath ruin your day. Give yourself a boost with Boost Oxygen. A few deep breaths of Boost Oxygen is all you need to help combat the negative effects of what we call temporary oxygen insufficiency, so you can get back to doing the things you love. Boost Oxygen contains pure supplemental oxygen that is safe for daily use and comes in a portable, lightweight canister without a prescription.
Now I live life on my terms. With Boost Oxygen, I am unstoppable.
Get all-natural 5-star respiratory support with Boost Oxygen. Get Boost Oxygen at these fine retailers.
Before we went to break, we showed you this meme of Secretary of State Marco Rubio. AI created it at our request. So now the question, why is Secretary Rubio holding a camera? Well, Rubio recently announced the United States will soon allow Americans to take their own passport photos at home, so you can use your phone or laptop.
Now, the CVS people, of course, hate this, and the Walgreens and all these other places, but you'll be able to take your picture from that device and be able to have it in real time through our security system, verify the facial ID, and it just saves you a lot of, you don't have to go down somewhere now and get a headshot and have the little pictures that you have to cut and then submit it, 3 passport pictures.
So no more trips to the pharmacy or wherever you go for your passport pictures. When does this go into effect? Secretary Rubio says the changes will happen in the coming months. And if you're wondering how your photo will be verified, the State Department will have special facial recognition technology. FYI, if you've never gotten a passport, the cost to get one is $165. If you want your passport renewed, it will cost you $130. And don't forget, I have a podcast called Greta. You like it? It's different. The one posted right now is a lawyer to the stars and an old friend of mine, Mark Garrigus. You can subscribe now or watch the podcast. It's free on your favorite podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or at newsmax.com/listen. Thank you for watching. Ed Henry, The Big Take, is next. Stay with Newsmax.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.